the Mutual Broadcasting System presents Richie and John.
Two voices strong in the podcast sphere. Richie and John, let's make it clear. Bringing the stories, bold and true. Standing with pride for the LGBTQ. The Mutual Broadcasting System, the network of pride. With Mutual, it's voices that are taking your side. Richie and John, hear the world echo your name. Fighting for justice, lighting freedom's flame. Champions of diversity, truth in the night. In the battle for equality, they're ready to fight.
The podcast that connects you with the people, events, headlines, and lifestyle interests of the global LGBTQ plus community. Here's Richie Roy and John McMullen.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Richie and John. We're back on our regularly scheduled programming. That means it is Newsday Tuesday. We did a Newsday Saturday last week, but we're back on the regular. So I'm here, of course, with my wonderful co-host, John McMullen. John, hello. How are you doing? How was your weekend?
My weekend was busy, really busy. I actually went to the International Women's Day events that we had here in the Coachella Valley. It was a big rally day for Democrats and progressives, and we had I'd say a good crowd of around 1,200 people who showed up in the big downtown park in Palm Springs, and it was quite a day of celebrating hating Donald Trump.
That's great. I'm glad that turned out so well. And yeah, there's plenty to hate. Whether you are not a fan of political instability or geopolitical strife or economic despair or the destruction of the federal administrative state, you name it, and something screwed up is happening, all because of the current guy and his buddy Elon. Yeah. But we have a bunch of stories for this week. Of course, as always, this is LGBTQ news, the things you need to know about our community, the things that we're doing and the things that are being done to us. And the first story we have is a super bummer. I mean, it's like colossally a bummer. And, because we really, we need our allies more than ever. And one of our allies kind of threw at least some of us under a big old bus. John, what happened?
Well, who do you think he threw under the bus? Because you say some of us. I think he threw all of us. But
I mean, yes, exactly. I mean, you bring up a good point. He did that. That's right.
And you know as well as I do that I have really been in this guy's corner. He is the governor of my state. And generally speaking, he's a very good progressive voice. He has certainly taken a fair amount of heat for making some boneheaded decisions like he did early on in the COVID nightmare that we went through when he decided to go and dine with some friends, I think in wine country at a restaurant for a birthday party when he told everybody else to stay home. And that, it was fairly indefensible when you're trying to, stand behind a guy like that and then he does something stupid. But Governor Gavin Newsom ignited controversy again after he agreed with mega activist Charlie Kirk that allowing transgender female athletes to compete in women's sports is deeply unfair. Because there's so many of them. The conversation took place on Newsom's new podcast, This is Gavin Newsom. It's a podcast where the governor compared this stance to conservatives' opposition to same-sex marriage despite the widespread acceptance for such unions. And Newsom also commented on a Trump 2024 campaign ad that criticized Kamala Harris for supporting taxpayer-funded gender-affirming surgeries for trans inmates, calling it devastating to her presidential bid. And again, I don't know how many inmates in correctional facilities across the country are getting the states to pay for sex changes, but I don't think it's a very big deal. And he suggested that many Americans disagree with such policies aligning with other post-election Democrats who warn that supporting trans rights could alienate voters. I think if those are the numbers that they are looking at from the data that came out of the election last November, that they are not looking at enough data. And not that that wasn't an issue, it was an issue, but it was such a tiny issue compared to so many other things that the Democrats, as they often do, fuck up in the course of running for public office. Anyway, his comments drew backlash from LGBTQ plus advocates and Democrats who accused Newsom of political betrayal. Human Rights Campaign's President Kelly Robinson emphasized the importance of bold leadership for LGBTQ plus rights, urging against using vulnerable communities as scapegoats for political gain. Newsom's stance has sparked a broader debate about the intersection of political strategy and equality. And a lot of people that I've talked with about this say it's all about the fact that Gavin is running for president of the United States. And he's trying to soften, the potential blows that he could face in that process. You know what I say? Look at your camera or at your screen right now. Gavin, that's my message to you. You should not be doing anything to lose anybody from your side at the moment.
I totally agree with you. And I think that it shows his political opportunism at its rawest and grossest because, it's a new podcast. And what does he do? He brings on this MAGA, this young pipsqueak MAGA, person. Charlie Kirk is very influential in the MAGA world. He's a jerk and he's a liar. But, of course.
They all?
Right. But so, he brings on Charlie Kirk to show, hey, I'm cool. I'm a maverick. I can run with the big boys and, I can take the tough punches, and then rolls over and wants to, try to show that, he's not just a down the line Democrat, that he actually can kind of like have some crazy opinions, and plays right into the wedge issue that they're just dying for Democrats to wedge themselves on. As
soon as I learned that he was doing this podcast, the first thing I did was I went to look and see who he was doing it with, and he's doing it with iHeartMedia. And right then and right there told me everything I needed to know about it. And I was so angry, I actually wrote a note to him. And I have a friend, a personal friend, who is close enough with him that he talks to him directly on a weekly basis. And I expressed to him that I hoped that he would put a bug in his ear as well, because I cannot imagine this person, who is also an activist, not reaming him out about this. Yeah. But the fact that he was doing the podcast with iHeart, which is the company, the media company that is responsible for distributing programs through its division called the Premier Radio Network, such as Sean Hannity, when he was alive, Rush Limbaugh, Glenn Beck, and a number of other right-wing nasty motherfuckers, the monsters of the midday, as I like to refer to them. I was like, this is what's going to come, because they know where their bread is buttered. Mm-hmm. And it just made me really angry.
Yeah. And I think, if he thinks that his presidential aspirations are going to be built upon capitulation to basically MAGA firebrands, that's a very interesting and I think wrongheaded strategy, and alienating, your core. I mean, your people, we really, the LGBTQ community, people of color, marginalized communities, tons of populations that really that get out the vote. They are passionate and engaged. And to just kind of turn on, again, kind of like you said, a group that's a fairly small in number, but is getting an undue amount of hate and scorn and attention and erasure. It's just so tacky.
And he has been on the right side of things with the LGBTQ plus population by and large. Mm-hmm. But I think it's important for us as a community to remind him that he can't do what other Democrats have done and take us for granted and just assume that we're going to be there and support him, even though he has now diverged on this one issue, which he thinks is a loser for Democrats. And right. It is his job to still make people in our transgender community feel as though they are going to have somebody who safeguards their interests, their lives, as much as any other American citizen.
Yep, totally agree. So this was kind of a super bummer that happened. And I guess in terms of presidential aspirations, I have to say I was never super into Gavin Newsom, but I'm super extra not into him now. And, you know, I'm definitely going to be looking elsewhere, you know, provided that we still have elections, which who knows. You know, so that happened. And then in a kind of a little bit of a not really lighter story, but a story that just has some kind of just almost comical resonance to it. In a widely criticized move, the Trump administration's effort to combat diversity, equity, and inclusion has led to the slating for removal of 26,000 images and posts from the Department of Defense's archives. Among these was a photograph of the Enola Gay, the aircraft that famously dropped an atomic bomb on Hiroshima during World War II. The plane was named after Enola Gay Tibbets, mother of pilot Colonel Paul W. Tibbets Jr. Now, you might be wondering, are they sort of trying to erase the fact that the United States dropped a nuclear bomb on another country? No, that's not it. It's because they literally hit Control F and typed in gay, and that came up. They just want to get rid of gay pictures of gays and women and people of color and all kinds of folks that aren't cis straight white men. So this erasure stems from an executive order issued by President Trump, with media outlets noting the mishap of the Enola Gay picture as an attempt to eliminate historical information on women and minorities in the military. The purge may ultimately affect up to 100,000 entries, sparking controversy also over the inclusion of essential history. Back a little while ago, the Air Force had initially flagged new recruit training videos about the Tuskegee Airmen for removal, but after uproar later retracted that decision. Social media users have seized the moment to mock Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth for flagging such historical material based on the presence of the word. And we will have a story for you a little later about a lot of words that are being Control F'd across the effing federal government's websites. So this story, you know, again, it's funny because it's like so ridiculous, but it does show kind of just this, like, they're working on every angle, you know, whether it's executive orders, whether it's dismantling agencies, or literally forcing the Department of Defense to go through its photo archives and delete pictures of people of color and gay people.
I don't even know what to say. I mean, when I first heard this story week and a half, 2 weeks ago, you know, with everything going on with the Enola Gay, I was like, okay, this is completely, unequivocally ridiculous. It has gone on too long, too far, and it just shows how effing stupid he is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, and the minions, you know, just the whole administration is just, you know, there's, you know, because there's that classic phrase, the banality of evil, but this goes even beyond. This is like what I don't even know what it is. It's the stupidity of evil, the fecklessness of evil. Like they are literally buffooning themselves into just straight up authoritarianism, fascism. Because I don't think Donald Trump has read a book on fascism. I don't think that he is like, hey, here's how they did it in Nazi Germany, I'm going to copy them. I literally think he's just his native tendency.
I was going to say, because, you know, I mean, he is America's Hitler, but I think that Adolf Hitler was far more intelligent than this guy by a long shot. I mean, not that I in any way like or support or endorse anything that he did. He is exactly where he belongs, captured in hell for eternity, and so too shall be Trump eventually. I mean, how can somebody this fucking dumb lead this country?
Yeah.
Seriously.
Yeah. I know. I mean, it's like someone needs to take him to a McDonald's play place and just lock him in there for 4 years. You know, that's about his level. Right. You know, he can play in the ball pit for a while.
Indeed. Well, shall we go back to our favorite our second or third favorite state of Texas.
Of
In a
course.
controversial move, Texas Governor Greg Abbott, he's the retard who rolls himself around in the wheelchair. He and billionaire Elon Musk have faced backlash for celebrating the termination of Frank Zamora, a Latino program manager at the Texas Real Estate Commission. Zamora was dismissed after refusing to comply with a new policy banning personal pronouns in email signatures. Mr. Zamora, who included he, him in his email signature to show solidarity with transgender, non-binary, and intersex communities, anticipated the policy changes and linking it to broader state and federal efforts. His termination followed President Donald Trump's executive order against promoting gender ideology in federal agencies and subsequent state-level policies. Musk's endorsement of the termination, expressed via enthusiastic emojis, that's so mature, contrasts sharply with his vocal advocacy for free speech. What? You mean somebody's being a hypocrite? His company's policies and actions have drawn criticism for censoring opposing viewpoints. Governor Abbott, despite frequently positioning himself as a free speech champion, has similarly supported measures perceived to restrict certain expressions, including at social media platforms and educational institutions. This contradiction has sparked public debate, just a little bit.
Yeah. And the thing is, these free speech warriors like Abbott and Trump, and Musk and stuff, don't get confused, because what they mean by free speech is to use the N word with impunity, to use the word that rhymes with maggot, all of that. You know what words that are not part of free speech for them? Gay, lesbian, cis, famously cisgender, cis, CIS, which means not trans, is banned on Twitter. You can't say it because Elon Musk considers it a slur, as opposed to the N-word, which you can say absolutely on Twitter. So their free speech goes in one direction always, and it goes towards hate. It never goes towards inclusion. When it comes to unpopular opinions, they only like the unpopular opinions that they tend to agree with.
Well, when you're the unelected president of the United States.
And, the thing is with the pronoun email signature thing is very insidious in the same way that Gulf of America is, because it sounds like a minor thing, right? Just take a little thing off of your email signature. But what it suggests is your expression is not your own. Your truth isn't your own. We dictate how you think, what reality is, who you support and who you don't. And so these kind of little things, these little incursions on speech are actually, and on truth and on reality, are part and parcel of kind of just a general derangement and just making people feel, especially people who agree with them, completely bent to the will of the administration and its minions, because they're outside of truth entirely now. And so it's very worrisome. Again, this was an ally, and no one's safe. That's it too. We've seen folks on Facebook and on Instagram and TikTok and whatever, who are like, Mr. Trump, I voted for you 3 times and I just got fired from my job at the IRS. Surely you must have made a mistake. And it's like, no, he
didn't mean it happened to me.
He doesn't care about you. He doesn't care about you. So yeah, hopefully the gender ideology executive order, I'm not sure if, I believe it might have been challenged in court. I'm not sure. I don't know if it has, but I hope it is, because it's so crazy. And people in states that like this kind of behavior, they are running with it. I believe it's University of Cincinnati, I think. They have replaced on the bathrooms at the university, there's like a men and women, a sign in front of the bathroom. They've replaced the signs to say biological men and biological women in front of the bathrooms at the university.
Really?
Yes.
Oh my God.
Yes. And, at least there's anecdotal evidence that RAs have been told to report any sort of trans or non-binary folks so that they can be assigned to floors or whatever that are appropriate for their biological sex. So we're seeing states run with this.
Now we would hate for you to think that retarded moron on two wheels in the governor's mansion or Elon Musk are the only two offensive people in the Lone Star State when it comes to proposing controversial anti-trans bills. Richie, what's the scoop?
Yep. Back to the Lone Star State in Austin, Texas. State Representative, hold on. I need to pull this up because it just says Tom.
Oh, you're right. It does.
His name is... Wait. This must be a different one because this one's Tom Oliverson. Okay. Let's put his actual name.
Sorry about that.
Okay. So I'll go back. Okay. So yes, back to the Lone Star State. Not just one story from there, but another one in Austin, Texas. State Representative Tom Oliverson introduced a controversial bill classifying transgender identities as fraud, punishable by up to 2 years in prison and a $10,000 fine. House Bill 3817 aims to amend the Texas Penal Code, charging individuals with, quote, gender identity fraud for identifying as a sex different from their birth assignment. This proposal echoes a U.S. State Department directive led by absolute slimeball Marco Rubio, barring transgender athletes under similar fraud laws. With no co-sponsors or scheduled hearings, the bill has drawn significant criticism. Carrie Butcher, a Dallas legal expert, warns this legislation targets personal identity expression, echoing recent restrictions stopping trans residents from updating state-issued IDs. Butcher raised concerns over potential criminal implications for those with inconsistent documents, impacting their access to essential services. Additionally, Texas faces a renewed push to ban gender-affirming care, building on the 2023 restriction on minors. They're now trying to kind of just go full hog on everyone. Amidst national legislative movements, these state efforts in Texas reflect broader challenges to the LGBTQ community's rights in the U.S. So being trans can get you prison time and a fine in Texas, at least if he has his way.
That's bullshit.
Yeah, it's the things, I mean, that we talk about, the states as being the laboratories of democracy. I mean, at this point, the states are...
Why do we want to lock people up for not hurting anybody?
Yeah, I know. But, we talk about the states as the laboratories of democracy. I think there are a lot of states right now, Texas and Florida, primary among them, that are the cesspools of democracy. It's just literally, just an open, sewer of trash. I mean, because the things that you see these bills, there are also just these dumb bills too that come through. I saw, there was one a month or so ago where someone threw a bill in to rename Greenland Red, White, and Blueland.
Oh my God.
It's just, these are just stupid things. And actually one that was related to our community is like Idaho, I believe, passed a bill that asked the Supreme Court to overturn Obergefell. That's not how the Supreme Court works. The Supreme Court hears cases and controversies. You can't just tell them, hey, Supreme Court, make a decision. That's not how it works. But that doesn't stop them from doing it anyway and scaring people and making people feel freaked out. So Texas, Florida, Idaho, cesspools of democracy.
Tennessee, Arkansas. Get the hell out of our country.
I know. Is Canada taking new applicants for states or what's it called? Provinces?
Provinces.
I feel like
I keep seeing these redrawn lines of the Canadian provinces, and in the West, that British Columbia ends up incorporating Washington, Oregon, and Idaho, and in the East, I think it's Ontario that ends up absorbing like New York and Massachusetts and a few other places that,
Yeah. I mean, I can see it with Washington and Oregon. Idaho's a little bit... I felt like Eamon Bundy and his people would be out there with guns stopping that. They don't want that.
Idaho is not invited to the Canadian Party. That's for sure.
No, they're certainly not.
Yeah.
So we do have a good news story, actually. We try to put in some good stuff. And we've got a good stuff happening at a network that's actually been kind of in the limelight for being a little shitty recently.
Yeah. Yeah.
So do you want to tell us about what's happening at MSNBC?
Yep, the Peacock, trying to hold on to its gay pride feathers, made groundbreaking history with Jonathan Capehart and Eugene Daniels co-hosting the revamped The Weekend show, which marks the first time that two out gay black men helm a news program together on a major network. They join Jackie Alemany and another new addition from the Washington Post in this fresh lineup amid changes that were sparked by ratings challenges post-Trump's election. Capehart, who of course has been on the network for a while with the Saturday show and the Sunday show, he is a Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist and previously hosted weekend shows, while Daniels, a former White House correspondent for Politico, is taking this position while continuing as the White House Correspondents Association president. Following the cancellation of Joy Reid's The Readout, these new appointments represent a significant network restructuring. Alum of The Weekend, Simone Sanders Townsend and Michael Steele and Alicia Menendez are set for a new prime time slot, and MSNBC's nighttime programming faced some shakeup, notably impacting hosts of color. Veteran anchor Rachel Maddow has criticized those cuts as damaging. The new hosts represent a fresh chapter under MSNBC President Rebecca Cutler. Under her leadership, she came from CNN.
I mean, good. I'm glad to hear this,
I am too, but I do still think that it is them trying to cover up a little bit and fill in with some paste the huge gashes that they made huge mistakes in by letting go of the two women who they had in prime time, who happened to be women of color, being Alex Wagner and Joy Ann Reid. Mm-hmm. So I think Ms. Maddow's pretty bold statement about her employer a week or two ago stands in terms of this is not how we should be doing business. But at least they're filling the space with other people of color and people who are queer. Mm-hmm. Still, I think it's all a reaction to a reaction.
Yeah. And I think that kind of highlights to me a broader gaping problem with the sort of democratic machine, including sort of democratic leaning press, which is they're adrift right now. Democratic politicians don't know what to do. They're kind of flailing with a few exceptions. AOC, I think, is doing a good job. There are a few folks that are out there messaging things in ways that are good. But I feel like there's this whole machine that is broken, including things like MSNBC.
Well, this article, as it was originally written, its original source before we cleaned it up, did make reference to the fact that NBC was bleeding. MSNBC, the cable network, was bleeding following the election of Donald Trump. And actually, that information as it was written was not really correct. Actually, they had extraordinarily strong performance, which is part of the reason that a lot of people were very shaken by the impact or the result of what had happened a couple of weeks ago when Joy Reid was let go. Actually, those shows were actually doing really well in light of the fact that people were tuning in even more because of the election turning upside down on us. I'm concerned because of how we report on the people who report. And I think it is incumbent upon us to get all of that information as correct as possible and to really look with a strong magnifying glass at what leads to these decisions. Obviously, some of the changes that are happening at MSNBC go back to where their parent company is, which is Comcast. They own NBC Universal, and Comcast is a company with a significant base in Florida, not probably outside of the range of communication between executives of that company and the current administration. I don't know. I want to have faith in them because I have friends who work there. Mm-hmm. And at the same time, when those friends take a huge axe to the tree that feeds them, it makes me question what's really going on inside the building. I think that things are very unstable at 30 Rock. The fact that you also have an African-American man who has been in the anchor seat for NBC Nightly News, Lester Holt, suddenly being moved out.
Mm-hmm.
There's just a lot of head scratching, I think, going on at the Peacock.
Yeah. I mean, we're seeing this, again, and we've talked about it before. For those of you who find this stuff interesting, which you should because it's important, On the Media, which is a podcast from WNYC, is a great resource to talk that looks very carefully at things like, why decisions are made at media outlets, what is true, what is not, what is not. It's a very, very good resource. So I would definitely also keep that on your radar. Because
it brings us back to a story we talked about this past week, which was the information that came out of Paramount,
right,
which of course owns CBS, MTV networks, and so on and so forth. That was a real head scratcher as well, especially when two of the three president CEOs of that company, they have these co-CEOs there, are themselves gay. I don't know. It's the media landscape right now is on ground that is, I think, settling on quicksand.
It's really true. I feel like actually we could do, if we got on, I'm trying to think, we could get on a guest or something. I feel like we could totally do a Saturday episode about the state of play of media right now, because it does affect us. I mean, we talked, about the story on Saturday, Disney scrapping the trans storyline and replacing that character with a devout Christian, and we've also talked about several networks just paying out defamation settlements that Trump brought that were clearly groundless, but they were afraid that the FCC might be weaponized against them. There's a lot going on that is not good for free access to the media. And that doesn't even, touch on the things like the AP being shut out of the White House for not capitulating to the Gulf of America. You name it, the media is absolutely under siege, and especially when the people who are in charge of that media happen to be oligarchs and plutocrats who, like Jeff Bezos, just this week, Ruth Marcus, who is an opinion columnist there at the Washington Post for many, many years, resigned because she submitted an opinion article that was mildly chiding of Bezos's decisions. And it was spiked, and they said they would not publish it, and so she resigned. So I feel like we could totally do a show on that for sure. But
I know, I have really, because I am very careful in guarding my friendship with her, I have been waiting for what I thought would be the right time to bring Rachel Maddow on this program. And I think maybe it might be time to go ahead and reach out because of all that is going on right now. It's a big ask for somebody who's got a lot of pressure on her at the moment. And so, I am going to try and see if maybe she'll come and join us sometime in the next 2-3 weeks. And if so, we definitely should have that conversation with her because she's right in the middle of that storm.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So that's our MSNBC story. Some good, but maybe a little bit of whitewashing, some not so good. And then we talked earlier about the Enola Gay, and unfortunately, it wasn't called the Enola Straight because then it would stay on the website. But there has been reporting that Donald Trump's administration has amassed over 100 flagged words in federal agency memos. The New York Times released the findings showing the words in a list that were advised to be either limited or avoided by government bodies, which highlighted terms associated with diversity and progressive causes like the word black, the word women, the words clean energy. This move aligns with Trump's broader anti-diversity, equity, and inclusion initiative, criticized for allegedly censoring speech and affecting federal hiring practices. Despite this, Trump maintains his stance as a free speech advocate, signing the, quote, Restoring Freedom of Speech and Ending Federal Censorship executive order. If you read that, it is bonkers. Backlash erupted when government websites started purging references to transgender and non-binary people. Notably, the National Park Service's erasure of the T from references to the Stonewall National Monument webpage, which ignited protests. Altered documents now omit mentions of racial injustice, impacts on marginalized communities. And, I really would recommend, even if you kind of are on the outs with the New York Times, which I know many folks are for many good reasons, that article is worth looking at because that list of the words and phrases just gives a real lens into what this administration's thoughts of bad stuff are. And the words are things like, obviously like diversity, equity, inclusion, gay, lesbian, LGBTQ, trans, but it's also just other things like equality. Like, I'm trying to think of some. There are just some words that are completely innocuously good, that you couldn't find fault with.
Were terms in there like Caucasian, eggshell?
It's a good, it's a good question. Yeah. So is straight in there? No. Is white in there? No. But here are some things that are in there: discrimination, diverse backgrounds, advocate, advocacy, activism, accessible, pronoun, of course, Latinx, mental health is on the no-go list. That's wild. Person-centered care, pollution, victim, women. The word women is on the list. It goes on. Gulf of Mexico, of course.
Now they're not going to be able to use any of those words like mental health when they try and come up with some stupid blame game for gun violence.
Right. Yeah. So it's worth looking at the list because it's very broad and it just shows, again, if people think they're going to stop with immiserating trans athletes, you have another thing coming because they are targeting a lot more than that.
Hey, can you check a couple of other words for me, Richie, since you're there? Could you look up Trumpanzee and could you look up maggot, MAGA small t?
They're missing. Yeah.
Huh. Yeah.
So odd. But yeah.
Orange Foulius? Is Orange Foulius there?
It's not there.
No, so, America's Hitler.
They haven't made the list yet. I'm sure that they will be on there soon.
Okay.
And again, these, where that actually, I mean, I know you're joking, but this is a list of words that federal agencies are being told not to use or to diminish or to get rid of. But that doesn't even go to things like, again, Twitter and other platforms, Facebook, which is, has basically gotten red pilled, as we saw recently, where, probably things like if you post the orange Cheeto, you're probably, flagged for a watch list. Not surprised. Wouldn't be surprised.
Oh, my God. Don't tell me. This is why I really cannot go to the airport and show up at the counter. They have probably got me 6 ways to Sunday off of the safe fly list.
Yeah, probably. So that was kind of we had some good stories, some positive stories like MSNBC, some not so positive stories, some comical stories, some awful stories like Gavin Newsom. We try to bring you we try to run the gamut here on Newsday Tuesday. And we will be back with you on Saturday for another episode of Richie and John. It is Substantial Saturday, so we will cover something a little more in depth. In the meantime, if you want to reach out to us, let us know how you're doing. I need to
let folks know something. If you haven't been to the website lately, at richieandjohn.com, RICHIEANDJOHN.com. We have removed the form for you to autofill out a message to us. Our email addresses are there. You can always write to us, info@richieandjohn.com or richie@richieandjohn or john@richieandjohn.com. Any of those are means of being able to get through to us. But with the friendliness of our current administration and Mr. Putin and his countrymen, we have seen a significant upturn in bad messages coming from places that use Cyrillic alphabets. And so therefore we have taken that form off of the site and are trying to reorient our web design in such a way that we will not have to be subject to that as much. But if you do want to have some sort of feedback and incorporate your own views about things that we're talking about on the program, I know Richie would love to hear from you. I would too, unless you're going to talk about my weight gain. There's a telephone number there as well. It's on the website, richieandjohn.com. That's really the best place to go for everything.
Absolutely. So thank you for listening. We will talk to you on Saturday. And until then, have a pretty good week. Talk to you later.
And a merry little Christmas.
Thank you for joining us on Richie and John. This podcast is a production of the Mutual Broadcasting System and is available at richieandjohn.com, as well as most major podcast portals, including Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, and Spotify.
With courage bold and voices clear, for life, liberty, happiness, they persevere. Never in the shadows, they stand tall. For truth and freedom, they answer the call. Richie and John, hear the world echo your name. Fighting for justice, lighting freedom's flame. Champions of diversity, truth in the night. In the battle for equality, they're ready to fight. And as the fight goes on from sea to shining sea, Richie and John, you're the voice of the free. Keep shining bright, your impact will grow. The world stands with you on the Richie and John Show.